Okay, so now let's do algos 3 and 4. When we're trading double tops, double bottoms, or breakouts and breakdowns, we want to use one algo. We don't want to make this complex because in reality, we don't know whether the market's going to make a double top or it's going to break out. We don't know if it's going to make a double bottom or if it's going to break down. So the idea that somehow we're going to be so quick and so smart that we're going to be able to change that as the market is cranking out is just a bit foolish. So let's look at and I'm just sort of picking something on the chart because I don't want to waste 10 or 15 minutes trying to find something here. We have a high that was made, we pull back into the high, we then challenge the high, we break out, and it starts an uptrend. So this would be a breakout, but it could just as easily have been a double top where we trade back into this decision point. I'm just going to pull this up. There's the little decision point. You can see we trade back into it. We come off of it. This starts what could be a double bottom, a double top, and then we break out and trade on the other side of it. Okay, so in reality, how we would be looking at this is with a range profile on the breakout, and we would be buying this at the volume-weighted average price when we came back in on this period here. We would be using the bottom of value as our stop. Now, again, if this were a breakdown or if this were a double bottom, a double top, we would be using the top of value as our trailing stop. So that is what our execution algo is going to be based on. So we know that we're going to start with a trade off of the volume-weighted average price. So think about the differences in these trades. The first one we did is the trade is sent to the CWAP. The second one that we did, the trade is sent to the point of control. This one, for both of these trades, we're sending the order to the volume-weighted average price. So we're going to say VWAP, and we're going to set that at 0. Now, again, based on the markets that you're looking at, you may find that you need to move that around, that you can fine-tune it. But on this one, we need to use the value area as our size off, right? So we've already done this. There's not any need for us to go in and create a new algo. If you think about what we built for the decision point, we have a value-based algo. We're going to risk 2%. We're going to size it off of the value low price for a long or the value high price for a short, and we're going to use a one-tick offset. It's already built. So we don't need to change anything here, right? It is just the only thing that we're doing is setting up a little bit different for how we're sending the order. So it's all already built. So in this case, I can use the VWAP 2% to size my order off. Then I can use the profit that we've already used. And if we want to go in and just make a variation of this and say, well, I want one that can just run, because a breakout, by nature, you're expecting the market to move. So do we really want it to take 100% at the 5-to-1 level? Maybe not. So let's make a variation of this. So we're going to call this one standard 5 and no 100% behind it. Let's add the steps. Let's say at 2-to-1, I'm going to put in a 50% profit ratio. At 3-to-1, I want to take 50%. At 4-to-1, I want to take 50%. And at 5-to-1, I want to take 50%. Now, it could be that you want to take 25%. You can change any of the percents around, but I just want you to make a logical spreadsheet of what that means. Every time that you're reducing what you're taking off, in the long run, you're making more if your trade gets to those deeper targets. But if it doesn't get to those deeper targets, would it have been better to put money in the bank? And my suggestion is that you sort of use 3-to-1 as your guidance. If you're making an overall average across all the targets of 3-to-1 or better, you are in the top 1% of all traders out there, period. Okay? So I want you to think about it in those terms. It's not about getting the most of your trade at 10-to-1. That's phenomenal, but how often are you actually going to do it? So you should think about it in those terms. So by leaving the last step at 50%, that means that if we had 2 contracts on when we got to 5-to-1 and we took one of them off, we would have 1 contract on that would be left for the trailing stop. In other words, it's not going to close out all of our positions. So by making this without the 100% on the end, we now have a different variation of the same algo, and we can go and select that standard 5. And then, of course, the VWAP, again, I would leave that as your first management algo. I don't see any need to complicate things at this early stage of the game. So once this gets to a 3-to-1 return, the stop is going to jump from the bottom of value up to the volume weighted average price. And if you need to improve your stop or you need to move it around, that's what this tool is for. This will be extraordinarily helpful when you're first learning to trade. And listen, your objective is to start learning the variations of these 4 trades. So in this case, we have a sort of a very shallow pullback breakout. Something that you'll see quite often is what looks like a big M, where you make a double top and then you break over and you trade all the way back down across the chart. You will see that there are variations of double tops and double bottoms, or triple tops and triple bottoms, or very simple breakouts to very complex breakouts or large range breakouts, where you will start to dial in a very specific strategy for that variation of it, in which case you may want to make the management algo much more complex. I just don't feel that that's a good idea for somebody starting out. The more you engage the chart by manually moving your stop through the move stop feature, the more experience you're going to gain, the more you're going to realize these variants, and you'll eventually get to a point where the trade is almost 100% automated. The only thing you're doing is sending the order. But until you reach that point, it's very foolish to think that there is some trade in a box that's going to work for every variation of the market. So now that we have all of our things put together, I do suggest that you, in this instance, that you use the sticky stop. Why? Because we're using the value area as our stop. So we want that stop to move around as the market moves. We want it to have the freedom to always be on the edge of value and not just increase or get better and then get hung up there because we didn't use the sticky stop. So after you've done that, you can save the defaults, and then keep in mind, now anytime I go back to my CWAP, I've got my CWAP trade. Anytime I go to the point of control, I've got my point of control trade. Anytime I go to the VWAP, I've got my VWAP trade. Much more logical to build it this way rather than to say, this is my swing strategy, because you may find that you put yourself into a trade scenario where you want to use that swing strategy because you want to trade off of the VWAP. You want to use the VWAP as your stop, but it doesn't fall into the category of swing. And if you've named it the swing algo, it's not going to make enough sense to you in the heat of the moment to use that. Long term, it will be much more effective if you have a common naming convention that makes sense all the way across the board. So those are the first 3 algos that you should build, and you can use them for 4 types of trades. And as I said, the important thing is that you can start to learn the different variances. And again, if you move into the advanced training, you'll see some of those variances and some of the fine detail about these types of trades and how you can really sort of get that locked up into a nutshell, so that every day when you sit down to trade, you shouldn't be looking at more than maybe 3 or 4 instruments, and you should be able to pluck out those opportunities very easily, know exactly what you need to do, let Algo do all the work for you. You know, I was having a conversation with a long-time customer. He's been with us for probably 7 years now, and I said, tell me what's different this time. What's different? You were buying all kinds of trading stuff. You were buying strategies and trainings and indicators and systems. And what was different about OFA? Why is this time different? And his answer was sort of on the mature end of the spectrum, because a lot of people, they just haven't been through enough to sort of understand where they are in the process, and they say things like, well, I'm just winning now. But the response was the entire difference was made when he could turn over the trades to AlgoX and not have to worry about the minutia of the trade, not thinking about the proper risk sizing, not thinking about any of these things that, let me tell you, they are the fundamental aspect of profitable trading. If you're not sizing your positions correctly, it doesn't matter how awesome your entries are. You will lose your money. It will happen. If you are not placing yourself in a situation where you can compound winners and avoid compounding losers, it won't matter. So to John, the most important thing was that he was free to make the right trading decisions because he didn't have to worry about any of the minutia of placing the trade. He didn't have to worry about moving his stop, didn't have to worry about where to put his stop, didn't have any of those stupid second guess moments where we say, I really think this one's going to work out, I'm just going to move my stop a little bit wider. When does that really work, guys? When does that really work long term? All it does is cost you twice as much on that trade, and then you're fighting to try and get it back. So I think if you'll put these into motion and start trading with them, go into the sim, start building these out, start placing some trades. Nobody has any expectation that you're going to find all winners right now. You're only a few days into this, but you should start understanding the logic. And that's the important part for us. At OFA, we feel like if you understand the logic, if the logic makes sense, why in a breakout trade would you use the volume weighted average price as your entry and the bottom of value as your stop? If you can see that logic, or in a decision point trade, why you would trade off of the point of control and use the edge of value as your stop instead of putting your stop above the high or below the low. If you can see that logic, this is going to be a very successful process for you. If you can't, you're probably not there yet, and so this may not be the best thing for you. I'm sure there's a lot of trading rooms and indicators and forums and gurus out there that you can, spend money on and waste more time with. Someday the logic here is going to make sense to you, and when it does, I hope you'll come back and take another look at it. But for those of you who are understanding the logic and you're getting the idea that there's no such thing as a 6-tick stop, that your stop has to be based off of the market condition, and if you get that and it makes sense to you why you would want your stop behind the VWAP, this is going to be great for you. So I really hope you enjoy it. Hope you get these algos built and dive in and start trading.